Hey everyone, welcome to the KE Report and another daily editorial. This time chatting with Dave Erfle, founder and editor of the Junior Miner Junky. Now, Dave, we've been talking a lot about the commodity sector, precious metals in particular, and just how momentum seemed to have been lost over the last about month and a half now for the precious metals and especially for the stocks. But today is a much more encouraging day for the stocks. Gold is only up, let's say, around $10. Silver is up, depending on what you're looking at, over $1 right now to about that 31.50 level. And the underlying equities are doing really well, led by the majors from what I'm seeing. GDX is up almost 3%. GDXJ is up almost 3.5%. SIL, silver miners, that's up almost 5%. Again, it seems to be the bigger cap stocks that are moving, as I'm not seeing tons of movement in the juniors. But Dave, is this potentially the start of another leg higher? And what do you think is causing this money to rotate, it seems like, back into precious metal stocks?
Yeah, I know we haven't talked in a while. It's been really interesting. The goal ever since the Republicans came in and swept the House, the Senate, and the presidency, the gold price has been consolidating within a $280 range. I mean, look, the gold price went up almost $1,000 in a year from late October in 2023 to late October of this year. Gold went up almost 54%, and that's nearly $1,000. And then it corrected $280 of that move in 2 weeks. And the silver price corrected 15%. So the gold price corrected almost 10%, silver corrected almost 15%, and now the gold price is consolidating in this bullish symmetrical triangle. And I say bullish because yesterday was the first trading day of December, and it didn't look too good for the gold sector. We had the miners down big. Gold wasn't really down that much, down like 10, $15. And the miners came out of the gate with a hard hit. But at the end of last week, we started to see silver show relative strength to gold. That was a positive. And now today, you're seeing silver showing really strong relative strength to gold, and the miners are now showing relative strength as well. So we need to see consistent relative strength in the miners and silver in relation to the gold price to give us a clue that gold is going to break out positively out of this symmetrical triangle. It's now consolidating within the end of that triangle right now. So once we see the gold price move up above 2,700 again, that would be a breakout of that triangle. And then if we see follow through buying, then it looks like that this consolidation is over. But like I said, today we're seeing a hint that it may be positive to the upside because we're seeing silver stocks leading gold stocks. We're seeing silver leading gold, and now we're seeing the gold stocks leading the gold price as well.
Well, Dave, just to that point you just made, it's usually encouraging when you're seeing silver leading gold and the silver stocks leading the gold stocks. Let's just say that we get our wish here and it does break out of that triangle in a positive way. Do you think that gives us momentum into the seasonally strong period of the first quarter? Usually we see that nice pop in January and February. Could that be what's setting up on a technical basis to pair with the sentiment that we normally see to kick off the first of the year?
Yeah, it could be, but unfortunately, I don't like the reasons why it's doing this. I mean, it's geopolitical, right? I mean, you just today, South Korea's government's now under martial law. The French government is really being close to toppling. I mean, tomorrow they're going to have a no confidence vote, and it looks like the prime minister is going to lose it. So the markets haven't really priced in the fall of the French government. So it's and then it basically in the Russia-Ukraine situation, it's like a calm before the storm. After last week, Russia launched that missile, that secret weapon that flies at like 10 times the speed of sound, can't be tracked, and can also carry a nuclear warhead. So, Putin basically said, look, stop messing with me. This is what I can do. This is a weapon that I have, and I can use it again. So as far as the reasons are concerned, I don't like the reasons for the gold price doing what it might about to be do is break out of this triangle and go back on its way towards that $3,000 target.
What about the more investment narrative, though, Dave, comparing what the U.S. equity markets are doing, the rotation into a wider range of sectors that we're seeing, Bitcoin continuing to do fairly well? What about the whole investment angle here of investors starting to pay more attention back to the precious metals during and after what has been a good year already?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's investors focusing on the Fed basically trapped. They have to keep lowering rates because even though inflation continues to go higher, right? We saw PCE inflation going higher again, and yet Federal Reserve officials coming out and saying they're still going to continue to lower rates, and most likely they're going to raise another quarter point, even though it looks like inflation has bottomed well above their fantasy 2% target, right? So the Fed has basically caved on inflation. And as far as, Trump coming out and saying that he's going to issue these tariffs, I mean, that is a stagflationary situation because it would slow growth and it would raise inflation. So, yeah, the gold price is looking at that as well, I think. And you got Powell's going to come out and speak again tomorrow. And Fed heads have been speaking, and most of them have been dovish, saying that they're going to continue to lower rates in the face of rising inflation. Now, we're getting a lot of jobs data this week. So far, it's been positive jobs data. Remember last month we had that terrible P report that everybody was saying was because of the hurricanes. So if the non-farm payrolls report comes out on Friday and it disappoints again, then it looks like the Fed's going to definitely lower rates again. So the gold price will obviously react to that as well.
Well, Dave, we got a lot of macro factors up in the air from geopolitics to financials, but let's dive back into the mining stocks a little further because today's action is a little more encouraging than what we've seen. Is there anything that sticks out to you as far as the movement of stocks, the movement of the ETFs, where you really think there could be, because they're leading the metals today, but is there any other action that you're seeing that you want to make a note of that you see as positive, constructive? I mean, one day doesn't make a market, but as far as constructive activity today.
Yeah, I mentioned it, but what I really like to see is more volume associated with it. When you see SIL showing relative strength to the gold stocks, that's a positive. When you're starting to see, this is just one day now today, when you're starting to see the miners showing relative strength to the gold price, because I mean, let's look what happened at the top of the recent move in the gold price, right? It topped out at 2,800 at the very end of October, but the miners topped out a few weeks before that based on what happened with Newmont disappointing the market with their rise in all-in sustaining costs going from like 1450 to over 1600, and then Barrick doing the same thing. So the miners started to roll over before the gold price top. So this is what usually happens. We see the miners start to give a hint of what the direction is going to be when the gold price bottoms and when the gold price tops. So we need to see some follow through tomorrow. After today, we're seeing the miners leading gold considerably, and that's because the silver price is leading gold considerably. If you take a look at, I've said this before, you take a look at the GDX and GDXJ and the silver price chart, they pretty much look identical over the past 4 or 5 years.
They do. And you know what? Silver stocks have done a bit better. You look at that SIL chart, and it is a better chart than, at least in the near term, the GDX and GDXJ chart because of some of those levels that GDX and GDXJ broke on the way down. So, Dave, what sort of follow through do you want to see? If you're pointing to GDX, if you're pointing to GDXJ, if you're pointing to SIL, pointing to silver, what levels, in your eyes, do we need to close at to end this week or at least touch this week to confirm that we are in another uptrend?
I'd like to see GDX get over 39, and I'd like to see GDXJ get over 49.50. GDXJ back tested 49 this morning and started to sell off a little bit. So I'd like to see more follow through buying above that level tomorrow. And as far as the silver price is concerned, it's showing a rounded bottom now at 30. So silver tested 30 a few times, and it's showing a rounded bottom here. So I'd like to see more follow through buying in silver. Silver needs to get above 32.50 on a weekly closing basis.
Well, Dave, just honing in on silver, somebody on our show made a really great point that it hasn't ever had an annual close over that $32. It's had periods of time in 1980 and 2011 where it got up to $49, $50, but it never closed the year there. We're getting near the end of the year, and we're actually within spitting distance of actually seeing silver get back up above that $32 level by the end of December. How important would that be on the annual charts to see an all-time annual closing high?
Yeah, that's a great point. And you'd also see it with it not really being overbought, right? It's not making a close above $32 on a parabolic move. So that's also very positive if we see it.
Dave, why aren't these smaller silver stocks doing better then? Especially the smaller miners. We have a number of people that follow some of them very closely that bring up these stocks on almost a daily basis, saying, look at this chart, look at that chart. But the ones that I'm looking at, and I've just pulled up about three or four different ones, their stocks aren't doing anything. They're not in aggressive uptrends. They're, if anything, scraping some of the lower levels over the past few months that they've traded at, even with silver at these decent levels. So why isn't more money or really any money flowing into these smaller silver producers?
Yeah, two reasons: AI and crypto. That's where a lot of the speculative money is still going. Look, you have the stock market continuing to make all-time highs, and yet the gold price rolled over, and the gold stocks rolled over a few weeks before that and rolled over pretty hard. I mean, GDX and GDXJ were up 70% in 10 months, and then they corrected 20% in 4 weeks. So, investors see that and they don't have any impetus to come into these high risk juniors when they're doing so well in AI and crypto, which are bubbles. But as you know, bubbles are really hard to figure out when they're going to pop. Each time it looks like, Nvidia has topped and it's starting to roll over. It has days like where it corrects the entire market cap of the mining sector. Something positive happens and it starts to go back up again, and the pricking of the bubble is delayed another day. So, the stock market hasn't been this overvalued since the dot-com bubble. You're looking at PE ratios. You're looking at sentiment. Sentiment is even higher than it was at the peak of the dot-com bubble. So we're due for a 20% correction, in a 10 to 20% correction in the stock market. It's going to happen soon. We just don't know when. And I think when that happens, then you're going to start to see investors say to themselves, okay, I got to start rotating these profits into something else. They're looking around and they see something that's massively undervalued as opposed to something that they've been investing in that's massively overvalued. And that's the mining sector in spades, especially in juniors that have really got something that they're de-risking in a really good jurisdiction with a competent management team.
Well, Dave, couldn't we see some of these smaller silver junior producers run even without the generals coming in, even without a correction in the
Oh,
general
we already
equities?
have. Yeah, and we already have. I mean, we've already seen bifurcation in a lot of these quality stocks, and I expect that to continue.
Well, kind of where I'm going is like the quality stocks, like the Gato Silver and the Silvercrest, before they were even taken over, they were running for a year, maybe 2 years to the upside. Mag Silvers continued to run higher. We saw a really nice move in Aya Gold and Silver, and those are some of the quality single asset producers that are still on the table, two of them being taken over because they're such quality. But when you look at the handful of smaller stocks like the Guanajuato Silvers, the Impact Silvers, the Santa Cruz Silvers, some of the ones that are multi-mine producers, they have languished to Corey's point, but couldn't they surprise people to the upside when they finally do show? And it is happening where they're starting to produce some revenues. Their costs have gone up, but if they keep producing revenues, just like the bigger gold and silver miners, couldn't they make a run that surprises people?
I do. I believe that they could, but silver needs to get over $35 for that to happen, I think. It finally got over 32.50. 32.50 was like a Maginot line for a while, especially on the weekly, and it rose up to test $35 in one day, and then it quickly reversed and came back down and tested $30 again. And like I said, it's made a rounded bottom here at $30. And I think the next time it gets over 32.50 on a weekly closing basis, and the point that you made, if we see $32 closed above on an annual basis, that will definitely perk up the ears of a lot of big time investors and start looking at this really tiny market in silver.
It's what we keep talking about, right? When some of these other investors are going to come in, but quite frankly, look, that there is still some interest in the sector, and investors have been focused on the higher quality stocks. Probably better that way, because when we do start to see some of that money flow down into the smaller ones, sometimes that means that it's the end of the cycle too. There can be some good gains to be had, but again, money focused on some of these higher quality companies, so it's not a bad thing, I don't think. Dave, as always, thanks for your time. Again, Dave Erfle, founder and editor of the Junior Miner Junky. We'll chat with you next week, Dave.
Looking forward to it, guys. Thanks again.